If you think you're going to get another one of those banquet spectaculars tonight, you're not. It's going to be far less formal and just as much fun, I hope. Hi, Evelyn. Yeah. And if I might say, you'd be surprised how many people came in and said, Walt, take it easy tonight. I think they're trying to imply something by that, too. As Judy said, it was 1952 when we came over here, and it was a railroad that brought me to this town. Good or bad, I'm here. And up until that time, I didn't have a lot of real interest in the railroad. I could take a quote from my father sometime, but I couldn't understand quite why, when we were youngsters, we didn't have model trains or didn't have much interest in trains. So I asked him one time, did he have any reason why, or did we ever ask? And why wasn't he more interested in model trains and the histories and so forth? And he said, darn it, boy, I spend 12, 15 hours a day working on the real thing. I don't want to play with them when I come home at night, too. Now, he was supposed to sing a little song for us tonight, but I told him he couldn't. He thought he was coming to a musical program and a stage show. Okay.
There's no singing while I'm reading.
No, well, stick around, Daddy. I think you'll have fun anyway. There is so much written and so much available, and yet so much missing in the study of the B&O Railroad that I don't think any one of us could absorb it all or have the time to study the rest of it to get all the information that's available. And there's no question in my mind, there are some people in this room tonight who know more about what I'm going to be talking than I do. And I would say, had he not decided he didn't want to do it, B. Beck would be here doing this discussion with you. Far more knowledgeable person on what we're going to talk about tonight. And I'm going to use him for a resource. Okay? If you're not familiar with any of B's works, this is one called The Mount Airy and B&O Story. I will be using much of the material that's in here that he too has used from this book, The Impossible Challenge. Bob, what'd you say your price you saw on this book? $60. $60. I did sell them for $19.95 at one point in time. How much, B?
35.
You paid 35. I believe the original price was 39, but 60 bucks. So if you can find that book. And this one, very good synopsis of everything you'd like to know. And if you want to, I have some here tonight, and I guess, Travis, we're permitted to sell them, aren't we?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Now, Judy indicated I was going to do some of this formally as a formal presentation. It's not that formal. Please don't expect me to be an orator that will astound you with what I've got to say and how I say it. We want this to be as informal as possible. We're expecting those of you who have little stories to tell to be able to do that too. One thing I realized as I was studying and trying to make notes as to just what we should be discussing tonight is that, my goodness, there is a lot. And my goodness, is there so much railroad history right here in Mount Airy. And many people don't know that. Many people don't know that because of Mount Airy, essentially, the railroads were better able to make progress moving west. The other day when Mr. Slayton and I were doing a little bit of reconnoitering to really make sure that these slides we're going to use were what they say they are, he made a statement to me that I thought was very interesting too. In that, I don't know when you came to the area, Mr. Slayton, but you made a statement the other day that, gee whiz, here I have been studying about all of these things, and it's right here in my backyard where it actually happened. So I hope you leave here tonight with some of that same thought process. I want to set the groundwork, however, for you. Try to get you to think a little bit back many, many years ago. And let's remember we're talking about the early 1800s. What was it like in this country? There wasn't much west of the Mississippi. And what there was in this country was developing from the East Coast. I suppose the only real transportation avenue at that point in time was something called the National Road. And we can't talk much about this area or the development of railroads without talking a little bit about the National Road and setting that up. That area through here at that point in time, I believe, was called the Frederick Road. It really wasn't part of the National Road system until some years later. But that road ran right through this town also. And we'll see how it had a little bit of effect here. Now, on the National Road, if I can continue to refer to that, there was this little place called Ridgeville. And just like many other places along the National Road where there were inns and hotels, blacksmith shops, there was accommodations to put your horses up for the evening, to put yourself up for the evening, to leave your animals for rest for the next part of the journey. And these may have been every 2 or 3 miles, every 7 or 8 miles, because journeys then took a long time. It was all by horseback and horse-drawn vehicles. People moved their herds of cattle, their herds of sheep, their herds of chicken, and whatever up and down the road. And just like any other town, there were pikers, were there not, Mr. Beck? Right. What's a piker? You know what a piker is? What do you think of a piker today? Well, a piker is somebody who made their money off of the people that used the National Pike. If you had a house next to it, a little store next to it, you sold or provided accommodations or did something for those people so that you derived your income from the people who traveled over the National Pike. And I'm sure we had some of those in Mount Airy too, and some of you may know who they were. But that's where the pikers came from. It was called the National Road because the federal government got involved. And I believe it was 1806 when it was something official about making it the National Road. And that, by the way, probably is what happened to our federal highway system, and you see what it is today. Okay. And you'll find out in your reading, or we might get a chance a little bit later to find out, it almost became a federal railroad system, but it didn't quite happen, and it never happened formally except for one short period of time during the war times that the federal government got much involved with the railroad systems. But think now, if you will, about the National Road. Think about how transportation occurred from the East Coast to the West Coast. Think about where Baltimore is. Think about where Philadelphia is, and furthermore, where New York is. Early 1820s. Business people in Baltimore were afraid that unless something happened, Baltimore was going to go down the tubes. Somewhat like we're thinking about downtown Mount Airy right now. Unless something happens, downtown may go down the tubes. So it was concerned businessmen who made the first real moves to try to improve the situation. Now, what was the situation? New York was talking about building a canal to reach western areas. Philadelphia was doing the same thing. The C&O Canal, which was Washington and west, had been put on the back burner for some time, and now it was propping its head back up again. There was politics involved. These businessmen in Baltimore felt like we best do something or we're going to get left out. We need to do something to get all that western traffic into Baltimore. So what were they thinking about? Something called a railroad. Railroad, and when I say railroad now, what do you think of? What does your mind conjure up when I say railroad? Ralph, what's a railroad to you? Come on.
Made of rail.
Well, you would probably define it more definitely, but most people who think of a railroad today, they think with two steel rails and big locomotives and long trains. We're still talking horse-drawn vehicles at this point in time. There was no such thing as a train per se. The concepts were all around horse-drawn vehicles. It was realized by these businessmen that if they could develop a better way to make a road to the west, particularly to Ohio, that Baltimore would reap all the benefits of that trade and would assure Baltimore of its success as the major East Coast port of the country. It had a couple advantages as why they were considering this. Many, many miles inland further than New York, and many miles inland further than Philadelphia, giving it a greater opportunity for less cost and less effort to reach that Ohio River and further on to the Mississippi River, which at that point in time was the mother of all rivers and was the mother of all transport, steamboats traveling up and down the Mississippi. Everyone wanted to reach those ports. These same business people got together and said, let's charter for a railroad, and they did that. See? And you had to you had to petition the government at that point in time. Okay? And I'm abbreviating a number of things here for you because I don't want to waste a lot of time on bringing you up to speed, except that it's necessary to set the stage. 1826, 1827, much of the effort put into let's build a railroad. Where were we going to build this railroad? Where would it start? Where would it go? How would it get there? Would the flanges on the wheels of the carriages be on the inside of the rail or the outside of the rail? Would the rail be anchored on small stones with a wooden stringer running the length of it and an iron strap on top? Or would we get iron rails imported from someplace? All the time still considering the fact that they would be horse-drawn carriages. The steam locomotive was nowhere around at this point in time except in England. A lot going on now. A lot of people thinking about how they can become part of this. Try to be part of it yourself. Okay. In, again, reading and looking for information, somehow I ran across all kinds of things. Somebody came in the store one day and asked me if I wanted to buy a book called The Story of the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, 1927. I said, yes. Okay. I got it for 35 bucks. I don't know what it would be worth today with us anymore. And there's some very nice things in there that we'll be using. I used the impossible challenge. And somewhere in my records I found a little pamphlet on the early correspondence of Alex Brown and Sons with regard to the building of the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. Now, these were people that were involved in that first group of businessmen. And I thought I would read a couple of things from there so you can understand what was happening. We're in the United States, we're in Baltimore. Baltimore's trying to find out just what to do and how to do it. They correspond with Liverpool, England, where they're attempting some railroad effort over there. This is 24th of February, 1827, at just the right time when things were really getting kicked off in Baltimore. This is just a letter. The people in this country, meaning U.S., have lately been turning much of their attention to the formation of railways. We send you by this conveyance 2 copies of the proceedings of some of the citizens of Baltimore, by which you will see it is contemplated to make a railway from this city to the Ohio River, those citizens being the group of businessmen. If this be accomplished, it will resuscitate Baltimore, and from the immense advantage of local situation will make her in a short time second to no city in the Union. The community seemed to take a deep interest in it, and charter has been applied for. We wish you to send us a copy of the charter obtained for the Liverpool and Manchester Railway Company with such recent publications on the subject and any other useful information you may be able to obtain for us relative thereto. it mentions some other extracts and papers that they sent along with it. The improvements that are daily making in the application of steam to land navigation make the latest improvements particularly desirable. An application will no doubt be made to Congress to permit iron, for this purpose exclusively, to be imported free of duty. The import process started back then. Whether it's granted or not, there can be no doubt that large quantities will be imported. If one thing goes on, we may find it desirable to get a practical man out of first-rate talents. Can such be readily obtained, and can you guess what compensation would command such a man? So they're looking for the guy to do the job for them. Okay. So there's nothing to go on. It's still experimentation. Where do we go from here? Yeah. Let's go right into it. Once they got their charter, still with no idea where they were going to go, but with the pure desire to move out, they started establishing where they would start. This became a political problem in Baltimore. Where are you going to start? Some people wanted it down closer to the port, other people wanted it everywhere. Wanted it someplace else. There were property owners who wanted it to go past their place. There was industrial people who wanted it to go past their place. Somehow somebody came up with a 66-foot rule. We still don't know what it's all about, but it said you must start at a point 66 feet above sea level, which put it back from the harbor in sort of southwestern Baltimore. Why the rule, we still don't know. It had something to do with politics, of course. Anyway, that's where they laid the stone. Okay? And there was a big ceremony. There was estimated to be between 70 and 80,000 people in Baltimore's population at that point in time, and it was estimated that over 70,000 were there. There are some accounts that say there were 70,000 population, and there were 70,000 people at this stone-setting ceremony. But the entire town turned out. They wanted this thing badly, whatever it was going to be. But they had a parade of all parades. They had everybody they can think of that was there. I won't go into all of the various organizations, but one for sure that was there was the Masons. And the Masons go to everything, don't they? They help us start anything we do. So it was a great deal back then, and that stone is still located in Baltimore, and you can go find it. Okay? But a cornerstone for a railroad was something a little bit different, but it was chosen as, we got to do something. So they had a cornerstone laying. All right. Let's move quickly now and see what we can do with this railroad. Their point, of course, was to reach the Ohio River. All the time, their focus was on the Ohio River. However, they realized there were places all along this route, wherever it might be, that it would be appropriate to establish as landmarks and goals to get to. Believe it or not, Mount Airy wasn't one. Did you know that? Mount Airy was never a goal of the railroad to get to because there was no Mount Airy. Mount Airy came because of the railroad, and we'll get to that a little bit later. Okay? But there was an awful lot of consideration of Hagerstown and Frederick. Frederick became a place to get to. And that's sort of where they set their sights as a short, long-term goal, with Ellicott City being the primary step that they wanted to take, 13 miles west of Baltimore. So they set about setting out the contracts for this road. There were dozens of contracts let to do this job. How long did it take them to do it, B? From Baltimore to Ellicott City?
Oh, they got there in a year, I think.
About a little more than a year it took them to get to Ellicott City. Remember that. Very little bit was known on how to do it. Remember that the labor was all wheelbarrow, shovel, and back. Okay? Geodetic survey maps were not available. It was a search out and find the best way. Engineers came from the Army to help them do this. There was all kinds of scouting trips. And it was sort of a learn as you go. And they in fact called it the University of the Baltimore and Ohio, because everyone who was working on it was learning. It became a tremendous educational process for them. The first train into Ellicott City was by horse-drawn carriage. Remember that, horse-drawn carriages. It had some dignitaries on it for the inaugural run. Mark this date, May 22nd, 1830. 1830. What they could call the real first train to anywhere, to Ellicott City. Therefore, making Ellicott City our oldest point of departure on any railroad, and I think in the world at that time. They started regular service back and forth from Baltimore to Ellicott City on May 24th, 1830, just a few days later. Okay. The first steam ride, and I mention steam ride now because steam locomotives were being developed. They still weren't accepted by everyone, and they still weren't sure what they would do, but there was a steam ride, and that was on August 30th, 1830. Okay. The significance of that trip had a lot to do with why Mount Airy, and let's continue to call it Ridgeville or Pars Spring, if I might, why certain things did not happen there. And we'll get to that as we move along too. Okay, you've got the environment. You know where we are. You know what we're trying to do. What I wish to have us spend most of our time doing is talking about what is so important to the railroad. Anybody know? Well, water taps go, but there was a couple reasons why. Excuse me?
The barrier.
Well, the barrier was what?
Pars Ridge.
The Pars Ridge, referred to as Pars Ridge because of Pars Spring Ridge. That was the obstacle they had to overcome. They knew that early on, and they had made some decisions as to how they would do it. When they established some of the rules that they were going to follow in building this railroad, one was it must not be too steep a grade anywhere. So they wanted to keep at 0.6% grade, or about 0.5% of grade for the entire route. Well, there are some natural water bodies that provide that normally gentle elevation. So they said, all right, we'll follow the south branch of the Patapsco River generally, going west, until we get to Pars Spring Ridge. And on the other side of Pars Spring Ridge, we'll follow the Bush Creek onto the Monocacy and further on to the Potomac. Okay. Why would they do that? What was their other choices? There was no grading of any significance except by shovel, wheelbarrow, and back. Dan?
Plus, your other reason to follow any type of a river course, or in addition to grade, would be that's the obvious source of trade in that period of time.
Precisely. Water routes is where everyone gravitated to for trade, including mills and residents and factories and so forth. But it was the only thing known to provide the gentle grades, the natural route of water. It was nature's way of doing it. There were, again, no geodetic surveys, no topographical maps, no heavily recorded elevations and grades that they could deal with like we can today, no equipment to move mountains with like we can today. So they had to follow what was natural, and that's why they chose these two riverbeds. They had also decided that should they run into any major obstacles like mountains, and they at that time were thinking primarily the Alleghenies, the choice of preference would be to use inclined planes. You know what inclined planes are? No. We're going to talk about inclined planes. That's where we're going to spend most of our time, talking about how they did it, because I find it the most interesting aspect of coming around, of getting to this area, and how they solved some of those problems. We have people here tonight from Watersville, Popper Springs. Where's some of the other folks from that might be names along the railroad? Anybody from plane number 4? Everybody know where plane number 4 is? How many people don't know where plane number 4 is? Or was? It's still called plane number 4. How many don't know where plane number 4 is? That's a good half dozen. And if you don't know where it is, and you don't know how it got its name, do you? We'll talk about that in a minute. Plane number 4.
There were 3 other planes.
Okay? Yeah, it's called plane number 4, Evan, because it was 3 others. Okay? We're going to find this, I hope, the most interesting aspect of this discussion. Anybody, B, would you like to offer anything now on how the railroad came up to this point, before we talk about the planes, as far as Baltimore, the circumstances, what it was like on the national road at that point in time?
Well, they were trying to follow the river course, and of course this was the first place that they ran into a hill of any size.
Mhm.
So when they got to that hill, they decided they would do it by planes, and they would install steam winches to winch the trains over the hill in a series. They had 2 on each side of the hill.
Okay. We'll talk about the planes in a minute, but was there anything else interesting about the national road? Because what it was leading into, they also realized that the national road itself was another route that somewhat could be followed. There was already a lot of trade on that route. So they chose the national road. It went through Ellicott City, came up, sort of followed the same watershed. The point being that this was the logic they had to use in order to build a railroad. Yes, Dan?
The other thing you mentioned in your opening part about the difference, the New York and Philadelphia connections and how they all wanted to get west. And one thing that I don't know that a lot of people realize, that B&O, the reason all the Baltimore folks chose the railroad, remember all the canal building was done at that time. There was no navigable river inland from Baltimore of any size like there was in New York and in Philadelphia.
And Washington.
And Washington. So
Yes.
it was a logical choice for them to take hold of this new technology called a railroad and put it to use. And they started before any of the other ones, in a sense, to embrace that technology.
He's right. It was the only people to try railroad. And still not even knowing which side of the wheel the flange was going to be on. Or maybe they even, you'll see some letters that I have here, they tried both sides. Sort of make it channel-shaped wheel, like a mill sheave or something. Okay? And they were building this railroad without those decisions. Even decisions on how the ties were going to be placed. And they changed their minds 3 or 4 times. Okay. However, most of it was laid on stone, many times granite, and other kinds of stone stringers with a strap of rail on the outside corner of it. Flat strap of rail. They're still talking about horse-drawn carriages, so there wasn't a lot of concern about snake eyes or whatever they called them when rails broke and so forth. Michael, do you have a question?
Yeah, one thing I think about, I mean, a lot of us know what gauge a railroad is now, standard gauge, but what did they start out with? Rail
Oh my
spacing
goodness,
back then.
that's a good question too. Now you're starting to realize, when I started reading, and as Mr. Slayton and B both would tell you, there are so many aspects of railroading and development of engineering at this time that you could study in itself. Nobody had really settled on how wide apart the wheels were going to be. There was 5 feet, some places 6 feet, 4 feet 6 inches, 5.5 feet. Various people that were thinking about this concept here and abroad had not considered standardization. Now, how they came up with 4 feet 8.5 inches, I don't know.
Roman roads.
What?
Roman roads.
Roman roads.
George Stevenson, who did a lot of work in locomotives, worked on a railroad for the mine. and he chose 4 foot 8.5 inches, and it followed on all the other railroads in England, except for 2 or 3, and then finally they passed a law in England that all railroads must be 4 feet 8.5.
But the question is, why 4 feet 8.5 inches? I mean, what's wrong with 4.8? What's wrong with 5? You know?
That was the width of the wagons, coal wagons.
That was the width of the ruts that the Romans left in.
I've heard that also.
But there was nothing scientific about it. It just sort of fell. It happened, all right? And it's a good thing it happened because now it is the standard. Can you imagine if railroads tried to get together back then, the kind of problems they ran into? Okay. So there was so many things happening, yet so many things happening without any precedence. So many things happening that required thought process and development right on the job. Did you have a question or a comment, sir?
I was thinking if there are people that is, that don't know where Plane 4 is, there may be people here that don't.
We're not going to tell them.
There may be people that don't know where don't know about the Tom Thumb. You might mention that.
Okay. This is a good time to mention that. It'll be later. I don't want to. Judy, you want to start your cookie operation yet? No. Okay, because I don't want this going too long. You've heard the story of the Tom Thumb, have you not? The Tom Thumb. That was a race between a steam locomotive, quote, steam locomotive, and a horse. Who won the race? Horse. Why did the horse win the race?
Belt slip.
Belt slip, but he only lost once. Okay? There was no question that while the test was going on, the steam locomotive was well in control of the situation. And if his belt hadn't broken or slipped, he'd have well won the race. But it was the thing of the time then. Yes, Ralph?
According to John Hankey, who's not a curator at the B&O Museum, the name Tom Thumb didn't come about till 1890 or so when the B&O decided to recreate its own history, and some public relations guy picked the Tom Thumb because it was a circus midget called Tom Thumb. Peter Cooper's engine during its existence was never called the Tom Thumb.
I don't know what that background is, and that's
Yeah,
interesting.
he turned that up in some of the research he's done down
But that
at the museum.
became the thing everybody in history learns about, the race between the locomotive, Tom Thumb, and the horse. Well, that was on the B&O. By the way, I thought another interesting note. Baltimore in Ohio, Chesapeake in Ohio. About the same time. But what's interesting, everything was the Ohio. There's no Mount Airy and Western, Ocean City and Eastern.
But if Pars Ridge had have been 4,000 feet high,
It
there would
might-
have been a Mount
might-
Airy and Western.
Might have been, okay. All right, here's what, any more questions or comments on anything about this to this point? Okay. Capture that point. We're the bunch of railroaders, as we call them, trying to get someplace west of the Ohio. We know generally what we're doing, but we know generally not a lot about what we have to do. We've got this place called Pars Spring Ridge, near the little community of Ridgeville. And we've got to figure out how we're going to get over it. We know we're going to use inclined planes, but how are we going to go out there and do this? I might mention one other thing. Golly, it's interesting to go read this stuff. Did you realize they had labor strikes back then too? Sykesville was that time called Sykes. It was just called Sykes, wasn't it? Because a man named Sykes had the hotel there. But it was a place along the railroad path, along the Patapsco River, where they had to go, and it was Sykes. That was the location, and eventually became Sykesville. Well, why did they have that labor strike be? What did they really think was the main cause of that? The guy that was running the operation, I believe, failed to pay the men, right? He didn't pay his workers, so the workers said, we're not going to do any more until we get paid more. And there was the people coming from Baltimore out, resolving the labor problem. They'd start again, and then they would have the labor problem again. The money wasn't getting to the labor. So if they didn't get paid, they weren't going to work. Can you blame them for that? We would do the same thing today. How did they resolve it? The militia came. The feds came out and said, okay, you guys go back to work or we're going to shoot all of you or something, all right? But there were labor problems. There were changes in the the labor teams. Many, many things happened. It took a long time. Remember, it was 1827 when they started. We recorded the first trip to Ellicott City in 1830.
It's pretty fast, really, by today's standards.
When you think about it now, we've done pretty. We had to build bridges. We had cuts to make, which means take a big piece of the hill out, and we had fills to make. We had to build means getting across the open areas, and that's why you see places like Thomas Viaduct, Carrollton Viaduct, Jackson Viaduct, Jackson Bridge, and all these nice stone arches you see. Okay? There was politics even in the railroad organization. This engineer liked to do things his way and wanted to design that way. Another engineer wanted his ideas put across and doing this. I can't go into all those details. They in themselves are separate studies that are very interesting. And anybody in the engineering field today should go back and read some of those things to study how they went about their approaches to various things. There was one small case, if I can glean from the records properly, the workers were filling in a ravine, making a fill, okay, without any regard for what was going to happen to the water when it came down through that ravine. They were just totally filling it across, and they would have had a dam. You know? So they didn't even know what they were doing when they did it. But of course, somebody was smart enough to come by and say, now wait a minute, fellas, you can't do that. You got to provide some way to let the water come through there for erosion. There was one other thing that caused a lot of problems in the building of the railroad. Remember I talked about the National Pike, and what did I say was every 3 or 4 miles? An inn or a hotel, and every one of them had a bar. Okay? Not a bar as we know it today. It was probably all just one big bar. Okay? But alcohol was the poison of the railroader. It caused as many delays as anything else. And in every place there was railroad workers, they would carouse and fight and get drunk and do all kinds of things, no different than they do today. Okay? There's a lot of interesting stories about that aspect of building this railroad.
Quite a real Irishman in those days.
A lot of Irishmen in those days, too. Anybody have any stories to relate in that regard?
WCTU came from that.
What's the WCTU?
Women's Christian
Temperance Union.
Lips that touch liquor shall never touch mine.
Could I have your name, sir?
Oh, man.
Norm Hammond?
I come from Maine, but every corner had a house, not even necessarily an inn, with a bar. Liquor was a dime a drink.
Yes.
It was the death of everything. And the Women's Christian Temperance Union rose up to try to put this down, and they did succeed.
But we won anyway.
We won anyway, yeah.
I had one more thing to read to you just before we take our little break here. If you're ready, Judy. Judy, I'm ready for a break as I read this last thing. You said you needed a couple minutes. We're going to change it a little bit tonight because I have to set up another drawing here that we're going to spend some time with. So I said, let's have the break earlier in the program, and we're about 45 minutes into it. It's a good time, so you'll get your refreshments. But there's one other piece I want to read to you, and I've lost my marker on it.
While you're looking at that, what's the difference in elevation between Ridgeville and Mount Airy as far as the railroad going through one or the other? Difference in elevation?
About 80 to 100 feet.
80 to 100.
Right, it varies.
Which wasn't appreciable, I guess, enough to
Well,
say, let's forget about Ridgeville, let's go through Mount Airy.
Well, we're going to talk about how that took place. Go ahead, B.
that's what they eventually did.
Eventually, but why didn't they do it in the beginning?
We're going to talk about that.
Okay.
Okay, no, let's answer that question now.
No,
No, it's going to set it up better. Yes, it will. I wondered if I was going to get through with anybody asking that question. You know, remember, there was...
I thought it was about 100 feet. Well, I don't know whether 100 feet made that much
Oh,
difference.
boy.
Big difference.
Oh, boy.
Well, why in the hell didn't he go through in the first place?
But to back that up a little bit, those people building the railroad actually had less concern about elevations than they did about curvature,
Right?
because horse-drawn carriages, you know, they can go around a full-foot radius curve if they want to. Right? when really the reverse is what they should have been concerned about. Curvature became more difficult to accomplish as trains developed than grades did. Okay. Yes?
Another thing that determined the grade in later years was the fact that the early engines had vertical cylinders, and they had less oomph to them than the later horizontal cylinders had.
Yes. You go back and just study the kinds of engines that were being developed would give you a days of discussion and the way the locomotive developed itself. Here's the one I was looking at. December the 18th, 1829. Now, we've progressed in our discussion beyond this, but this will add a little humor to it. At this point in time, a vast amount of money has been expended, more than ought to have been, by the ignorance of our engineers. Okay? We think it likely the board will find it convenient to part with all of them shortly, except Knight. Now, if you read about this in any of those books, you'll read about this Mr. Knight a lot. He had a lot to do with the railroad. But they're going to let all these other engineers go. And I assume, B, that this was the corps of engineers that the military had given them, perhaps.
They kind of loaned it.
Yes. But the federal militia had given a whole group of engineers. There's never any exact account of how many, but they said, these engineers will be loaned to you for whatever usage you see to help you build this railroad. Okay?
Well, the racket's no different today.
Same today. Okay. We'll find it convenient to part with all of them shortly except Knight. One track of our road, about 1.5 miles, is completely finished, which seems to answer our most sanguine expectations. It has, however, cost much more money than we calculated on. A great part of this arose from want of practical experience. Many mistakes have been made, which we hope will be guarded against in the future. Okay. Now, good thing about that is they admitted their mistake and said, let's fire the engineers. Now, I hope I didn't bore you too much with that setting the stage for you. It was a little bit jumping around too, but there's so much about it that you just can't put it in one nice flowing movement there. But we're at this place called Pars Spring Ridge. And Ray, I'm going to answer your question right now. Why? Why did they go over this big hump when all they had to do was go a little bit further east and it would be a natural cut in the ridge for them? Why, Ray? Can you understand why?
No, I can't.
Nobody knew it was there.
Nobody knew what was there.
The cut was there. The lower elevation was there. Remember, we found out what was going on by walking out into the woods and choosing the place to go, and they were following the South Branch Patapsco River, which has the headwaters where?
They weren't very inquisitive, were they?
Oh, no.
Damn.
You
mean when you figure going plane 1, plane 2, and then over and plane 3 and plane 4, that's against taking a little walk.
But to them it wasn't. You just have to understand, this information wasn't available. Everything was done by scouting survey, and they did not have that information. But we'll find out that it wasn't that way very long, okay?
No.
Right?
Also, your profile shows 15% grade. Those early engines couldn't even pull that. They couldn't have come in about it.
Wouldn't have done it either way, is right.
Maybe they'd only had to have
But-
plane 1 and plane 2, one up and one down.
Well, it may have been, but for whatever reason. But remember, they were also following the South Branch Patapsco River. And anybody know where the headwaters of the South Branch Patapsco River is? Where is that? I'm saying where?
On the other side of
Opposite the Esso station.
Right across from the Exxon station. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Well,
Boat River.
all of us old timers know it, but there's got to be somebody here that doesn't.
That's right.
That's where the headwaters of the South Branch Patapsco River start, right there at that farm. It's called Four County Farm. Okay? And it wrangles all down through the back country there. So that was still primarily the reason why they were up that side of the ridge. Just as a little side note, we're going to be talking about another place in a moment that probably wasn't there at this point in time, or was not there at this point in time that we've just got to. Watersville Junction. Everybody know where Watersville Junction is? You know where Watersville Junction is? Okay. Well, that means a junction of the railroad of some kind, doesn't it? This is Ms. Lohman's father was the telegraph operator at Watersville Junction. And what year would you say some of these photos are?
Well, it says on there that the tower was eliminated in 1933, so it would have to be prior to that.
WX Tower, Watersville Junction Tower, abandoned 1933. That wasn't something you did, was it, Debbie?
No, I didn't want it that.
Okay.
Several of us boys used to go out, visit down there on Sunday.
This is a very good photograph, a very good study in what it was like at that point in time, too. Look at all those pipes laying along the
Oh, yeah, mechanical.
mechanical. Why did they need so many at Watersville Junction? Thank you, Ms. Lumen, for sharing that with us. I would like to see somebody make some copies of those. I think it would be good for record purposes. Very good. Something else I think as a side note, too, as we might be able to demonstrate here in a moment. I got to thinking, where are a lot of these early records, even the handwritten records? These from W.R. Brown were preserved because they were prominent people and somebody recorded everything that they did, all of their writings, whether related to the railroad or not. So these were drawn from that. We have to remember that the centennial of the Iron Horse in 1927 was sort of the beginning of any real recording or concern about compiling records. But then I got to thinking, as I read something else about Baltimore, the fire of 1904 very possibly destroyed a lot of railroad records because the B&O building was right in the middle of the fire. That's a possibility. Of course, I don't know how many photographers there were out there at that point in time. So there's a lot of reason why there's no records around. And some of it, I'm sure, is conjecture on just what was happening. But I think enough people have done the job that we can understand how they had to do it and where we are. Okay. We've reached these plains. How do we get over them? Remember I said they had decided they would do it through a series of inclined planes. Well, a plane is generally described as, give us a scientific definition, Ralph. Flat,
Well,
or
I'm thinking of a good one now. Any path, no, that's not right.
but remember your geometry, plane
There's a
geometry,
good
so
way to
dealing with
describe
flat
it.
surfaces. Well, that's what an incline would infer, that this plane was going to be graded. It would have an incline to it. On the other side, would have called a decline? Would have been a decline plane?
Well,
I don't know.
It was a decline one way and an incline the other way.
According to what direction you want to take, right?
Right.
Okay. B, I'd like you to turn to the page in your book that describes the inclined planes so we can use you for reference. Anybody who doesn't have a copy of this, you may want one. So, over here. Anybody else? Now, this is a page printed from The Impossible Challenge, and it's a book I'm going to tell you that if you can find one, get one and read it. It's called The Impossible Challenge, the B&O Railroad in Maryland. It has a great deal about this area and about the topic we're going to talk now. Anybody else wants one, just come up and get one. Now, just hold that as a reference there. And B's got his page there. Now, very quickly to tell you about this book that I mentioned to you that B. Beck put together. It is a compilation of what, 9 articles, B? 9 or 10 articles of writings he did for what was then still the Shopper, I believe, the early days of the Mountaineer Shopper, now the Mountaineer News. And there was enough requests and pressure to say, hey, put it together. So B, through Mountaineer News, along with Mountaineer News, has put his compilation in this book. And it is absolutely the best synopsis of everything that went on that you can get. So I say you ought to get one. And that's what we're going to be taking some of this information from, because it's the best record in paraphrase of the whole thing. What happened? I'm going to let you look up here at this map. Well, it's not a map. This is a series of drawings. The primary date on them is 1918. They have been updated over the years. This was put together for me by Mr. Norman Murphy, who was the manager or director, whatever, of real estate when he retired for the Chessie system. We got this primarily for the centennial celebration in itself, in that we should be able to find out who the original landowners were in Mount Airy and the area from when the railroad first came through town. We would know who conveyed their properties to the railroad. And some of those names are on here, and you're welcome to come up and find anybody you think you might know, or your relatives, fathers, grandfathers, etc. But it does have some current information on it also. But he went to the trouble to put this together for me and presented it to me like this. I didn't realize I was going to be able to use it for this discussion, but it has worked out just fine. Bear with me if you will. This is the south branch of the Patapsco River, this little squiggly line. This, and we're going to go further with this thing, but to go back to the original, that is the original line of the very first track of the railroad, this horse-drawn arrangement that was coming up the grade. This is what you will know as Watersville. And everybody knows where Watersville is, right? It's east of Mount Airy a little ways. Okay. For the sake of having you orient yourself, this area became known as Watersville Junction, and we'll know why in a moment. But let's follow this line of the original railroad, and I've done that with a dotted line. There was no line on here to indicate this was a railroad path, but I know that it just flowed gently along the north side of the South Branch Patapsco River, and there it is. It would come through there. Someone asked me a little while ago, where's Twin Arch? Everybody know where Twin Arch is? Have any problem understanding where Twin Arch is? Well, did you know that's not the real Twin Arch? You people have been fooled all these years. Anytime you see something drawn up by the town or whatever, it's referred to as the historic Twin Arch. It is not the historic Twin Arch. It's the most known and most famous, but we're going to show you the original. But this is Twin Arch Road. Everybody know where they are? This is Twin Arch Road. You can tell it by the right-of-way today. And there's a photo of that in B's book also. Okay, here's Twin Arch Road. This, of course, is Mount Airy. Please ignore these lines up here for the time being. But so that you know where you are, we're not here yet. There is no Mount Airy, but so that you know where you are, this is Main Street. Okay. Give me a little leeway on the lines and whether they're straight or crooked, guys. But this is Main Street, and Michael, this is Buffalo Road. All right, helping you a little bit to know where you are. This, of course, is east. This is west. Twin Arch Road. If you follow that map that's in the book, or the flyer I gave you, it has a few more of the roads there that you can perhaps understand. Okay. B, you make sure I do this properly now. The plains of Pars Ridge. They decided they would put 4 plains, 2 on the east side of the ridge and 2 on the west. And between these plains, there would be a flat area. Why do you think they even had to consider that?
Place to let the trains
Well,
sit as
she
they
said,
load it up.
well, not, to rest.
It's basically
These were
right.
horses. Okay? We all should know by now that going around a curve, an upgrade, no matter what the percentage is far more difficult than going straight up a steeper grade. Is it not? Okay? So this provided a way to accomplish a lot of grade in the shortest distance. And yeah, then we got this flat spot that we can just sort of relax a little bit on. I'm sure that was part of the logic. Plane number 1 began in an open field about 1.8 miles west of Watersville at what is now the Twin Arch Road, where stables and a shelter were also built. That's where they could change horses if they wanted to. And by the way, as well as the national road, the railroad was going to take good care of their horses. Every few miles, I think the most was 7 miles, there was going to be a place to take care of the horses, exchange horses if they had to. Good care of these horses, it was the only way. Now, if this whole system works right, we're going to build the 4 planes. Ralph, you want to grab these others and peel that tape off the back of them for me? It's a double-sided tape, you know, just peel it with your finger. But I wanted to do this dramatically for you. Okay, here we are, about 1.8 miles west of Watersville, at what is now Twin Arch Road. And we're going to build plane number 1. Okay. Plane number 1 was 2,150 feet long. It rose up, inclined 80.4 feet. That meant it was a 3.7% grade. Far exceeded. That means 3 feet 7 inches in every 100 feet. Doesn't sound like much now, does it? 4 feet in every 100. But that was quite a grade. Okay? Plane number 1. And that's approximately where she sits. Or did sit. We're going to show you in slides in a moment that there are still remnants of plane number 1 there. We're going to go back and visit. Okay. Between plane 1 and plane 2, was what they referred to as a long, 3,774 feet long, flat, level area that included an S-curve at the end, approaching plane number 2. Now, follow if you will. Some of you can't see for this, so I'm going to move it. This is that line, approximately where I've been able to locate it. Please don't mark me for accuracy. But here it comes, takes the S-curve, and approaches plane number 2. Okay. This S-curve at the end crossed over the National Road, the Frederick Pike at that point in time. Did you know that? Anybody been to Parsville? How many of you rode down the old National Road? Mr. Etzer, how many times did you go down the National Road? US 40? Well, there's a little piece of that actual road where it actually locates, still there. If you take East Ridge, yes, Oscar?
The gal sitting there in front of you, it was a Buzzard, and Buzzard's store was right there.
The foundation for Buzzard Store is still there. Okay? We're going to send you there after a while and let you go look for yourself. Okay. Now, let me put that in here for you. This is that section of road. A horse path, the National Road. At the same time, there was water there, a stream, in almost exactly the same orientation that the current Twin Arches. There was a stream to cross over, South Branch Pataska River, and, no, that was the, what was the other, the small creek name, B? It wasn't the Pataska River. It was that small creek there. It was a small creek anyway that comes down out of that area. So the creek was there. What is it? And here was a National Road, so they had to cross it. How did they cross over the National Road at that point? What did they build, folks? A twin arch. The original twin arch was right here. The historic twin arch was right here. And half of it is still there today. Did you know that? Half of it is still there. Not as high as it was, it's been cut down, but the part over the stream is still there and still can be seen from both sides. Okay? The part over the highway, of course, is gone because improvements over time have changed the elevations, the grades, and the construction and so forth. But that's something you can walk down and see. And we've been concerned about preserving this twin arch, and there's the one up here going to go to waste. You ought to go see it sometime, and we'll tell you how to get there. Anyway, it crossed over the National Road with a system of twin arches. After it left, plane number 2 was 3,000 feet long and rose up incline, 99.6 feet. That's 179 feet we've come now. Okay, 179 feet. And we're going to put that right there. I think it'll stay, Ralph.
Yeah.
Find me another small piece if you can. Stay with me, though. Plane number 2, approach the ridge. The highest elevation, 828 feet above sea level. Notice the highest point on your original roadbed on your little diagram there, 820 feet above sea level. At that point in time, there was a 20-foot cut. It was a flat area, 600 feet long. It may have been round, it may have been rectangular, but it was 600 feet in length between the planes. Here's where they were going to place stationary engines. Okay? They were going to plant stationary engines that could help the horses or whatever reach down to the cars and pull them up the plane, and then hook them up again and let them back down the other side. Okay? Fortunately, they never had to do that, but that's what was planned for that point. I read one account of one of the dignitaries who was riding one of the first trains and how he came to this great plain where all the facilities for changing horses and the steam type equipment was there to assist the carriages over the grade. But it was approximately 600 feet in length, and it was flat. Now, this is Main Street and Route 27. It was the highest point. That's why we call it Ridge Road, right? Now, if you ever notice, going south and going north, that's the highest point for many miles in both directions. Now, it wasn't called Pars Spring Ridge everywhere, but in the local area it was referred to as Pars Spring Ridge. And if we could have drawn that, it would have pretty much followed what we see here. Okay, you still with me, Ray? Okay. Immediately on the other side of the ridge, they built plane number 3. This, too, of course, was a flat area. Okay. It was 3,200 feet long. It declined, or inclined if you become 159.6 feet in 3,200 feet. That's a lot of elevation, making it a 5% grade. Remember, they had wanted to stick with 0.6% or less if they could. Now, that, of course, took them down. It was the longest, and it was the steepest of all of the grades. And if you look on your little drawing, you'll see how it shows it that way. Okay, this, too, was followed by another long S-curve and flat area, 3,687 feet long. I don't care if you remember the measurements or not, but it gives you some idea of what was going on. And they built plane number 4, not the town, the inclined plane. Okay.
There's a piece of tape there.
Hey, Ralph, I was going to say, now we're complete. Okay. That's how they got over the ridge. That's how they went that 179 feet up and back. Okay. This, by the way, I think would be called Woodville Road now, is it? Okay. That's what that would be. You know where it goes from there. Now, there's lots of study and more writings about things that happened in and around these inclined planes and how they came up to them with the horses. And many of the locomotives were tested on these planes. You'll find several accounts where the engineers, not only testing the railroad, but testing the horses and the locomotives, would come to the base of plane number 1. There's one account where a locomotive and 4 or 5 cars get to the base of plane number 1. He unhooks 2 of the cars, was it B? And puts the locomotive in high gear as best he could and reaches the top of the ridge with safety valves a-popping. Okay. This wasn't a great achievement. First time it had ever been done anywhere, at least made record of. And it was done right here in Ridgeville, still no Mount Airy. Okay. Okay, that was 1832. 31 and 32 is when the planes got. So we're still in the early 1830s. Okay. There's too much to go into now to tell you all of the things that happened. But before we go any further, I'd like to show the slides we have.
What is the building on 144 that has the sign on it that says plank number 4?
That is a community recognized and became known as plane number 4.
That building is not anything.
I don't know that that specific building has any,
That's just Mr. Clay's, one of Mr. Clay's.
but there was a station there, and what was more important about plane number 4, and you can read in the book, and I'll take some time to tell it then, but we can go on all night. Okay, it wasn't just a simple process of getting horses or locomotives up the grade, over the grade to Frederick, etc. First of all, there was no braking mechanisms in that day. In fact, there's one account where the people rode the carriages up to the top of the plane when a special brake person got on the car. A brake person. He got on the back of the car and he held the brake for the descent down the other side, okay, so that it wouldn't go too fast. I mean, it would run over the horse if they turned it loose, all right? All right, as locomotives were developed, steam locomotives, and steam locomotion came along, at plane number 4, they housed helper engines. Trains coming from the west would come to plane number 4. This additional engine would hook onto them and help them get behind them or whatever, help them over the grade or up to the top of the ridge. Then they would go on their own eastbound. Plane number 4 locomotives that were there would also help the westbound trains. Okay? He would go up the grade and he would meet them and help them on the east side. So plane number 4 became a place where extra locomotives were maintained. Now that's a real general synopsis of it, but there's a great deal more also that went on in plane 4. It was a very active place, and the community became known as plane number 4, and is still known as that today. Okay? I believe it was an actual spot in the postal system, wasn't it, B? Yeah. Plane number 4. Yeah. That's another interesting aspect of this whole thing. Okay? If railroad or not, if you study the postal system around here, every community had its own post office. I mean, plane number 4 had a post office. Ridgeville had a post office. West Falls had a post office. Woodbine, Morgan, Long Corner, Watersville, every 2 or 3 miles had a post office. Okay? Plane 4 had its own post office, and it's still plane number 4 today. Yes, Dale.
Plane number 3 is, you can see some of it because it's now part of a driveway in my neighborhood, and you walk down it, and then you see this cut area where it keeps on going.
Right. We're going to show you some part of that too, but he's right. Much of plane number 2 is gone. All of plane number 4 is gone. Okay. But let's stop there for a minute. Now let's go back and help Ray get around this mountain. Let's talk about the second way. Now, Ray, what happened? B&O got a new president, unfortunately from the Pennsylvania. A Pensy man took over the B&O for a while.
And straightened it out.
And the first thing he said, straightened it out literally, didn't he, Ralph? Okay. He set about certain improvement projects. And one was to reduce the grades and curves and improve the overall efficiency of the railroad, and also to improve it financially. Now, he didn't stay around that many years, but one of the things he did was take a different approach to the Pars Spring Ridge. So they set, this wasn't too much later either, they set about finding another way. Let's go find a better way. And yes, Ray, they went marching out into the woods. And they found, lo and behold, this cut in the ridge, a smaller depression in the ridge. Over here, just slightly north of where the current plains were. Okay? And they said, gee, this would be a better place. By this time, locomotives had developed. Steam power was well on its way. They didn't have to worry about horses anymore. They didn't really have to concern themselves about inclined planes. So, they chose a point, again, somewhat west of Watersville, and this place I told you became known as Watersville Junction, where they separated from the basic old main line and followed a route, much lesser grade, in and through Mount Airy, coming into another small obstacle. I'd said in Mount Airy, but there was no Mount Airy there now by this time. You ever look behind Van Sant Plumbing? You people know where Van Sant's is? There was a large cut, some 50 feet deep, that had to be made there. In fact, if you look at Watkins Park, you know where Watkins Park is? When you turn into Watkins Park, you know where you are?
Roadbed.
You're right on the roadbed. And if you look across 27 to the gate on the road that's in front of the Mormon church, that's the roadbed that we're talking about right here. Okay? And what are we going to do with that someday, maybe, Pam? That's going to become one of our rails to trails maybe someday. Anyway, that's the route they followed. They had the cut here that had to be made, and then directly opposite that was a large fill. Now, do you know where that is? If you look at the back of my store, if you take a walk up there, you'll see this large fill. And there's even a larger one on further west. I don't know how high that one is further around here. Daddy, you know what the elevation of that large fill back? A massive fill back here also. And you can walk that rather safely now if you want to sometime. You'd enjoy it. But that was the only thing they had to encounter there, but it still gave them some significant grades, but it was much, much easier than what they had done so far. So that was 1838. I do not have any record, I haven't found any record of when the exact date may have been of the first train into Mount Airy.
1839, I think.
Okay, well, this was late 1838 is when this was completed, so it must have been 1839 or sometime. But there's no specific date like February 1st or what. Because they still wanted to get to Frederick. It was still the desire to get to Frederick, not Mount Airy. There was no Mount Airy there. Let me get back, if I can digress a little bit. And before this even took place, the move into Frederick, the first train to Frederick was December 1st, 1831. Arriving in Frederick with all kinds of celebration, the bands playing and so forth, and it says, at the summit of the railroad, somewhat east of Frederick, they had erected a large banner over the railroad. Now, where was that summit east of Frederick? It had to be top of the ridge. See? So the people had erected a large banner in Ridgeville to help celebrate the people getting the train in Frederick. And that was a very interesting aspect of it, too. And when they thought they got to Frederick, baby, they had done it. We have a real terminus now, a real place to be, a real place that trains can go to and leave from on a regular basis, a real place for industry, a real place to pick up goods and take them to Baltimore, and a good place to take Baltimore goods and sell them out to the country people. Oh, by the way, what was one of the most desirable goods that came from Western Maryland, Frederick, and so forth, and taken to Baltimore? If it wasn't the most desirable, it was the most appreciated in the cold winters.
Coal.
And wood, by the way. The loads of wood that went to Baltimore were one of the most important commodities they could bring in. Because they had no way to get wood in Baltimore, did they? Coal really was only starting to come along by this time. But I thought that was an interesting note. And of course, you can read the accounts of the revenues that the railroad created at this point in time. Tremendous revenues. I mean, it's 7 cents a ton for this and 5 cents a ton for that. And would you say liquor was only 7 cents a bottle or something like this? And it was tremendous to see what they used as figures showing the revenues and the profits they were making. But Frederick did it for them. All right, let's get back to town. Once we went through this cut, Mount Airy became. Right? Because as happened in many places along the railroad, the industry, the farming, the mills gravitated to this railroad because it became the way that we could take our goods and sell them someplace. And also get things that we heretofore couldn't. So the balance of trade began to get very important, if you want to talk about it that way. Right? We could ship things from the country on these mills into Baltimore and get back the goods that they had that were conveniences, you know, like washboards and things like that. And this fellow that owned this store right here along the track must have really reaped it in big time. Okay? Because he was sort of a, well, too bad it wasn't him at that time. But Selmans and Hoods, and you've read some of B's accounts in the Mount Airy News too, that he's gotten from all the records we found in the store, where they just sold everything. They got much by railroad, sent much out by railroad, and one of his most recent accounts, I'm going to tell you to go find the paper, was the trading the eggs with the Abernathy Company in Baltimore. Did anybody catch that one in his last article? Okay. I'm going to tell it real quick. Do you mind, B? We have found all kinds of records in the store. We have the original Dave's book in 1887 when the Hoods and Selman started in business. There's much there to be told also as history. But in digging through papers, and Michael's brother Floyd has been going down into the basement where I've got all those papers stored. They were in packs and vials and boxes and everything else. And pulling out all the billheads and letters and correspondence and notes from different people throughout the Mount area that say, please send by the bearer $2 worth of boots and I'll pay you when I get my apples done. These are true notes that we have. That's beside the point. That's another whole thing. But they apparently shipped eggs to Baltimore by the train. Okay. All the farmers around would bring their eggs into Hoods. Hoods would probably package them up and send them to Baltimore somehow. But the one company was getting eggs from Hoods, and it said, I read one notice back from the Abernathy Company that said, whatever you're doing, please tell your farmers to get their eggs, gather them sooner, and ship them sooner, because most of them are bad by the time we get them. But it gets a little bit further into it and says we had to give 37.5 dozen to the bakers, we had to give 6.5 dozen to this person, and out of the whole order, maybe 10 dozen was all we were able to sell. So please tell your farmers not to hold their eggs. One comes a little bit later, essentially saying the same thing. When your people gather their eggs, they must gather the setting eggs and everything all at one time, because some of them are usually oily, smooth and oily or something, and are rendered useless. However, we understand why you may delay choosing the eggs, as you also realize that we delay in sending you our checks. However, our checks are good when you get them. Okay, that's the kind of stuff. But so a lot of trade went on in Mount Airy, and Mount Airy grew from that. And that's why Mount Airy is there. It wasn't Mount Airy until that happened. Mr. Etzer spent many of his years somewhere in that part of town, in one business or the other, didn't you? What was the first business you dealt with in downtown Mount Airy, Mr. Etzer? Was it the milling company?
No. A&P store.
The A&P store. Anybody know
The
the
very first one was Watkins and Zepp over on the north side of the tracks.
Okay, see, he doesn't remember. It's been so long ago. How many years?
That was my first employment in Watkins and Zepp store.
Watkins Zepp store on the
Just
north side of the railroad,
back, yes.
which of course burned down in many years. How many years was the mill there? Well, it had burned down twice, didn't it?
What are you talking about?
The mill,
This one.
just on the north side of town. The mill that's in the drawing, yes. There was,
Norman's Mill?
yeah, well, that was the most recent one.
Yeah.
That it eventually burned down too, didn't it? In 1969, the last mill burned down, and that came close to being the third fire in this town to burn the whole town down. But of course, fire equipment was much better, response was much better, and the town was saved. However, I've spent $4,000 to $5,000 repairing the roof from the heat from that fire. And by the way, some of the papers we're talking about, and these bundles up in the attic, were singed from that fire. Okay? I don't want to go into that. We can go. But the mills sprung up. We had the canning factory. Mount Airy became a very good place for the railroad to have come to. Let's depart from that now so we can move on a little bit further. We can talk about that all you want later and separately if you wish. But Ray, that's what happened. Therefore, the inclined planes were essentially abandoned sometime in late 1838-39. They were sort of at indecision whether to keep them at all or not. But of course, they maintained the property. It still was their property. But this was the major use, and we had how many trains through Mount Airy? 10 or 12 scheduled trains a day sometimes through Mount Airy. Is that not right, Mr. Etzer? Became very active. And you know, if you get the book, you'll understand more about why Mount Airy became as active as it is. Okay. Then we come to Mr. Lowry. Is that what his name? I'm sorry. Can you hear me over that? I have a hard time listening to it. Technology developed, locomotives developed. Still a third way was sought to get over the grade at Mount Airy, because this was still a grade. in the total reconstruction, which began at some parts in 1900, but through our area was mostly 1901, 1902. I think I'm close there at B, aren't I? Okay, it meant reducing the grade, realigning the curves. And this red part is what is currently owned railroad property. And you can see how the curvature changed, and you can see how the elevation changed if you go back to your little chart. But some interesting points about it. One of the other things that happens to me a lot is when railroaders come into the store and they want to do rail fanning. Where do the trains go through town? Because they think since the tracks are right beside the store, they must go through. I say, no, they don't. They go through the tunnel. Tunnel? What tunnel? How many people don't realize there's a tunnel? Almost under Kentucky. No, not quite. No, you're stretching it a little bit there, Dan. Huh? Does everybody realize there is a tunnel under the ridge? Everybody here should. Okay. That tunnel is the longest tunnel between Pointe aux Rocks and Baltimore. When they put the tunnel through, now how do I do this? Okay. Without messing up the whole thing. This is the west end of the tunnel. This is the east end of the tunnel. See? The tunnel went through the ridge, crossed the highest elevation at precisely the same point that the inclined planes 2 and 3 did. Okay? And as Dale was saying, you can go to this area on 27 and you can see some of the remnants of plane number 3. Okay? So we came to Mount Airy and over the ridge using the inclined planes. The second route started at Watersville's Junction, came through and around what is now Mount Airy, went back to the original line out here and proceeded on west somewhat in line of where those planes went on to Frederick. And then the third rerouting took place, and if you notice, if you follow it all the way to where the beginnings of it is, they've moved the railroad from the north side of the river to the south side of the river. Okay? Most of their desire was to make the curves shallower and the straight area straighter. Okay? This is still a congested area as far as mapping is concerned, but you can still see this area. If you ever go into Parsville, you know where I'm talking about. Just before you get down to the cul-de-sac, there's a little road that branches off to your right. That is the old Frederick Road. That would take you down past Buzzard's store. It's Buzzard now. Like it when I first came around, it was Burdett, now it's Burdett. When I came around, it was Mullenix, now it's Mulleno. Okay, doesn't make any difference. When I came over, it was Denison, and it still is. Okay, yes, Dan.
What time frame is this third realignment?
1900.
1901, 1902.
So that's when the Pennsy.
That's when the Pennsy man was in control. Yes. Okay. Now we should also note that when Hurricane Agnes came through, she wiped out most of the railroad. Okay, here to Baltimore. You should also note that it became dual tracked also. There was 2 tracks. There was 2 tracks and went through that tunnel. How many people realize that?
Places where you can get back in.
There were, yes sir, there was 2 tracks. It was all double tracked all the way. Was there any place that it was not double tracked between Pointe aux Rocks and Baltimore? It was all double tracked, plus passing sidings, so forth. It was all double tracked. And there was 2 tracks went through that tunnel.
Only single tracks with passing sidings after Agnes, I believe.
Correct. And we have one of the main passing sidings still here. If you listen to the radio frequencies on the railroad, you still hear them talk about East Plain and West Plain. It still maintains that name today. East Plain and West Plain are locations on the railroad. Did you also know that all the dispatching for any activity up here is done out of Jacksonville, Florida? Okay. So just realize what has happened in technology and the ability to do things like that. It just boggles your mind. Okay. You can observe the east end and the west end of the tunnel fairly readily. And maybe now's the time to do it. Bob? Yeah. It took, yes, it was about 2 years. And let me, well, Okay. This information is in a small part of the book, but it's 2,757.6 feet in length. It goes on a curve as well as downgrade at the same time. Consider the engineering that took that so that we don't have one of these uh-ohs on the other end when we come out in a different place than we planned. Okay? To go downgrade on part of it on a curve and the rest of it, of course, remains tangent, as they say, or straight. Okay? Built in 1902. Well, this means anything to you. Drift tunnel through medium talco slate ledge. A portion of the roof caved in near the west end during construction. Don't know if there's any injuries or whatever. The tunnel was first timbered. It was timber lined. And then it was bricked in later years and remains a bricked tunnel today. Okay. Also, many of the stone arches became bricked from some part up too, which is the way Twin Arch is today now too, the Twin Arch you think about. But that's the Mount Airy Tunnel, the longest.
Wasn't that tunnel at its time considered an engineering feat?
Oh, yes.
Time? I mean, that was made history, that tunnel, as far as the
doing
down and curved and all that good
Now,
stuff.
that reduced the grade a good bit, but it changed the summit for the railroad. Okay. Where this was the highest point for the inclined planes, and of course, I don't know just where it happened up in Mount Airy, but it was some point up here remained the highest point. When you put the tunnel through, the re-drilling of the tunnel and the rerouting and the grading brought the summit of the railroad to about where Bennett Branch Road crossed it at the time. And you know where that is. That now is approximately the highest elevation on the old main line. And it's downgrade all the way to Baltimore, and it's downgrade all the way to Brunswick anyway, isn't it, Daddy?
Yeah, it dipped a little bit down the road, yeah.
Yeah. But it's downgrade in both directions, which means if you could turn a car loose at the top of the grade, it would go all the way to Point of Rocks probably before it stopped, or Brunswick anyway, and turn it loose, it would go all the way to Baltimore before it stopped.
Go to Harper's Ferry almost, right?
So it's still the highest point on the old main line, and it's right here in town. Okay? But it's where Bennett Branch. Now, how many people know where Bennett Branch crossed the railroad? I know you do because you walked on it. You do. Many times you walked it, but it's not there anymore. It's the road we live on now, right? We live on Bennett Branch Road on the other side of 70. We're the out-of-towners. Okay. But on this side, you can still see some of it. There's a little piece of road. If you come out of Mount Airy where the library is, they now call it Ridge Avenue. Okay? That's, excuse me, Dad? Old Bennett Branch Road. As it comes down past the library. Okay?
It goes on through to Long Corner Road.
It would go on through the Long Corner Road. That it does. But it, if you follow the road, there's a little piece of it between 27 and East Ridgeville Boulevard. And if you look behind Little George's, you know where the Little George's used to be?
There was no bridge down
Yeah, and the bridge went across. It was a,
It was a big iron bridge, and it's torn down now because when they built the highway, they took that bridge down because afraid of people going across it.
Mhm.
I walked
She can tell you about walking across it and dropping things off of the bridge down on it.
We used to walk across there, I was a little kid, and men would be working down on the railroad, and we drop our pencils just to make them pick it up.
You see? All right, let's take a moment. This is Miss Clara Fleming, and her husband Aubrey sitting with her. He told me an interesting story that, of course, I didn't know, and I wouldn't know, Mr. Fleming, because I haven't been around all those years, right? So I rely upon people to tell me. When the original railroad was on the other side of the river, right, at Watersville, and did your property go?
Well, yes, it's right on the line of the property, but it wasn't mine at that time.
He has a farm on what's now West Watersville Road, right? Was it always called West Watersville Road? Okay. He has a farm that the lane goes off of West Watersville Road and goes all the way down to Watersville Road in Watersville. What's the story you were saying?
Well, as an engine blew up there, it's about a half a mile up from Watersville, the engine blew up and killed a man entirely. They found him, part of his body hanging in the trees. And that caboose off of that engine was, I didn't own the farm at that time, but the people moved it up there, and I used it for years, up to 1950 or 55. Old Sal would have pigs in it.
Wonder what they're going to do with the cabooses that are getting rid of today. Okay. I think you'd find there's a lot of people around here have many interesting stories, and I wish we could talk all night. However, where are we? I know where we were. We want to help you go find these planes and what's remnants of them if you wish, to help you understand too. However, we cannot condone that you can go on railroad property all you wish. Remember, you're also on people's private property. I did speak to Dr. Full today, and his property hits all of it. This line and this line, and this line and this line. Dr. Emmett Full, everybody know Dr. Full? So I said, Doc, if I ask you, you'd let me walk down in the woods, right? I said, sure, anytime, but, you know, don't forget, if you go someplace, you want to do this, ask the property owner. You can't do things today like you used to be able to. But let's first of all talk about this one again. As you go East Ridgeville Boulevard, and just before the cul-de-sac I mentioned, a little split of road, you can drive down there past where Bouzzard's store was. You can actually see the foundation for it up there. We think that's what it was. Remember, Buck, I told you I thought it was Buzzard's store? Okay. But just as you would stop before reaching the railroad, you can't see a thing, but if you get out of your car, as you open the door, you'll see this mound of dirt beside you. And if you just step back a little bit, look over, you'll see the stone arch that went over the water, the little stream there. It's still there. That, my friends, is the original, really historic Twin Arch that I think we ought to be doing something about. And understand that that is where this flat area came across. If you take a left just shy of the end of that cul-de-sac and go down in what's called Watson's Industrial Park, there's a couple industries there. Colonial Equipment, the bus people are there. And if you follow that road, you would eventually end up at what used to be Martell's Junkyard. It's now American Truck, I believe. To approach it from the other direction, if you go down Twin Arch Road, just before you get to Twin Arch Road, the entrance to that junkyard, American Truck, if you stop at their entrance, look to your left, you can see what was the first part of the first plane. If you drive straight up that driveway and just a few yards up there, there's a house that backs up to this driveway, and between that house and that driveway, you can see the cut. That's plane number one. You can continue on further up here and see more of it. Okay? And like I said, you can see a lot of this, and in the Impossible Challenge, you'll see other photographs of this area that are still there. There's not much of plane 2 left, but in one of the slides you'll see a photo that Buck took from approximately this area. We can estimate where it crossed Route 27 and goes up through the Voslo property. But if you go south on 27 now, just after, excuse me?
That's not 27, that's South Market.
South Main.
South Main.
Yes, I'm sorry, it's not Route 27 anymore. I'm sorry, folks. It's South Main Street. Well, but it's not even 808 down here. It's still South Main Street, right? What's the numbers down there by now?
1800.
Well, we got to. Anyway, it's South Main Street. But just, instead of taking the left to go back down on 70, just beyond there is an area where you can stop and you can get out and you can take this driveway path-like thing and you can follow generally the area where plane number 3 was. But any evidence of the remaining of plane 3 and plane 4 is gone by US 40 and Bill Moxley Road and 70, everything is totally gone. All's left is a little community called plane number 4. Let's do the slides now, Buck, and let you see them. And when you can see this well enough, okay, this is the east end of Mount Airy Tunnel from a distance. It's single track now. Buck, let's move it on to 1. This is a close-up of the same tunnel, of course. and try to visualize that it was dual tracked. There were 2 tracks that went through there. Hunted all day to find this pointer, and I'm not using it yet. Okay. This is, what year did you take these photographs about?
About 10 years ago.
About 10 years ago. So it's somewhat different today, but it was rather clean. I think if you went there today, you see a little more junk around it than anything. But we thought we would help you find the tunnel. To get to the east end of the tunnel, you take that little side road off of East Ridgeville Boulevard, park your car, and walk west. You cannot see it from where you park your car, but you walk west, being very, very careful. As you walk west, you'll also be able to determine where the summit of the railroad is. You can very distinctly see it. And if you need a little help finding it, as you go along, back in this area, on this side, you'll see some remnants of the old bridge abutment still sticking out on top of the hill there. But that is the highest grade, and that's approximately where he is right now. Notice that it curves and goes downhill at the same time from this point. Okay. The west end of the tunnel, very easy to find. You just say that, Ralph?
Yeah.
Very easy to find. Take 144 west from Ridgeville, and you will cross what used to be the turnaround Y down here. That's been, track has been taken up and abandoned now too. But just after you cross that area, where the new pumping station is that the town put in, you can park there, I believe, and you can look just back to your left. The railroad's immediately on your left, I mean within sight, but you can just step over a little ways, walk up not too far, and you'll see the west end of the tunnel. Okay. This is the west end taken from a distance. See this area? Whoops, come back. That's okay, Mark. Sorry. See this up here? That is approximately where plane number 3 is, and that's the path you can generally see from up there. Okay. This is the west end of the tunnel, a little bit closer up. Notice it's come out of there straight. That's where it reached the straight or became tangent. But it, just like in the other, it's a little hard to imagine 2 tracks going through there, isn't it? And I'm not sure, guys, with some of those new SD60M locomotives with the wide cabs, 2 of them could go through there nowadays. If they did. Probably not.
Well, where did the one leg of the line come out off of that? Did that come up by that station? By the...
You mean, okay, maybe I can help you, Dan. West, where plane number 3 ended, is an area that got named Mount Airy Junction because that's where the second line came back and intersected with the original road bed. At Mount Airy Junction is where the Y was, also the turnaround Y. Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay. This is the road, of course, that comes up into town now and serviced by CSX to the cold storage plant and the Myers fertilizer plant, which is down here. Okay. But if where we're looking at right now is right about here, which is very short distance from where the turnaround Y was. We might This is the current twin arch. You're traveling essentially southeast or southbound through Twin Arch. Here's the arch over the Patapsco River. Here's the arch over Twin Arch Road. We come back up this way a short distance, like I said, at the driveway of American Truck. And you look up their driveway. This is plane number 1. Right here, you'll begin to see the cut. And as you go on further up here, you can tell it very well. You'll note that it's there. Of course, it's grown up considerably even more now. Believe it or not, this is the cut. Okay? You can see the sloping here. You can see some of it over there. It gets deeper as you go. And right about where American Truck's shop is now, the center part of that, you could stop there and look down over the bank into that deep ravine. I estimate it's what, maybe 20, 25 feet at that point? Around 20 feet. Yeah, around 20 feet deep, but you can continue to see it. This is more of the same cut, or a little bit further along, but it's the one that there's most of. You can see it got a little bit deeper, gets a little further over. This is in the same, similar to the photograph you took before, but from the other direction. It's a little bit meaningless to you as a photograph, but if you go see it, you can definitely tell that it's there. Is at the early part, or the later part, of plane number 2, And he's up on plane number 2 taking a photograph down into the east end of the tunnel now. Again, about 10 years ago. But he's standing on what was essentially plane number 2, about halfway up the grade. This is a little further west at the end of the property where DeLauder's junkyard was. And it's vacant now, of course, for all the new construction is going to take place there. But this is at the south end of that property, is it not, Mr. Slayton? That junkyard where it was, now that's just up from where the Little George's is down in that area. We're not sure exactly if this is it, but at some point in time, of course, the road, Route 27 obliterated much of plane number 2, but this we think is a little west of the traffic light that's there now and would lead you on up through the Voslow farm. A good way to mark it up there, if you look as you come down past McDonald's on your right, you'll see a small depression over there, just a few yards. I assume that's where it was. It's a logical place. But you can also see the telephone pole, the communication line coming up out of the ground. The tunnel is just about under that point right there, almost precisely where the planes went under the ridge. Go ahead. And on the other side, as Dale was telling us, there's a little telephone box or something that sits close to South Main Street out there. And approximately near that, you can walk this path and head west. This is plane number 3. It's there, and that's a little bit for a little bit different period in time. And this is the railroad track. We're up above the west end of the tunnel at this point in time. But from here it's gone. That's where the west end of the train comes out of the west end of the tunnel, goes down to where the turnaround Y is and so forth. But from here on, there's very, very little that can even be seen. Sometimes it's a little bit evident just after you go past Monterey Junction. There's some parts of it I think is still there, but plane number 4 is essentially, or rest of plane number 3 and all of plane number 4 is gone. There's nothing left. The discovery of the use of sand or dirt or whatever to break or halt the movement of a train was discovered right here in Mount Airy. Did you know that? Because you read, didn't you? What? To aid in traction, whatever. That was developed here, and there's a very nice piece on that in Mr. B's book. I recommend that you read it, because the man who developed that died a poor man. If he had patented his idea, he'd have been a rich man. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
I understand that there were, well, hundreds of workers brought in to work on that tunnel. Where did they all live? Do you know?
I don't know where they all lived.
Well, majority. Where did
But
they house
they-
all those? They were Irish.
It was
immigrants.
actually encampments. Any place they could. They even camped out, didn't they, B? Tents, whatever means they could. People that took them in the area, those people came primarily from Baltimore. Yeah, that's where the labor had to come from. There was really no labor force in the local areas per se, because everybody was into farming or milling or that kind of effort. Yes, Dan?
Most of those instances, when a railroad built something like that, the common labor would be in encampments. And a lot of your engineering and obviously management, things like that, any people overseeing might be staying with townspeople or things like that.
Yeah, a lot of them would stay at, remember with these inns every 2 or and hotels every 2 or 3 miles, some of those people could be out there. Yes, Dale?
The tower that used to be
At Monterey Junction?
Yeah. Did it ever have the Armstrong switches going?
Oh, yes.
to the
How many switches
wall?
was in that signal tower out there, Daddy? At Monterey Junction? About 20. How many times did you have to throw them?
Not too often.
Not too often.
Some of them worked the signals, and others worked the switches.
Mhm. Yes,
I
Mr.
think for the newcomers that come in town, they did not go straight through. They went in from each end, right? When they built the tunnel?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
That's what Abraham's uncle said, which he would have been well over 100 years.
I don't think there's any actual account, so that could very well be true.
And
we-
they met within inches.
Yeah. Yeah, as Buck says, it's normal procedure to come from both ends, but whatever they did, it prevented one of those, oh my goodnesses, you know. Sure would have been bad if one went here and the other went over here, but it's still something. I mean, I wouldn't know how they do it today.
Well, his uncle said it lived up at Barthlow's. He worked on the railroad
Okay,
too.
what was his name?
Otis Haynes.
Otis Haynes. Okay, of course, you realize, Mary Jane, from your question, the railroad became a major source of employment for people in the area over time. Okay? A lot of this became a railroad town as well as anything else. And it too had its times on Friday and Saturday nights, didn't it, Travis? Them railroaders were a mess, weren't they? Took their money and went to the bar and spent it. Okay.
I thought they would have hopped the train to East Baltimore Street.
Yes, he thought they would have hopped the train to East Baltimore Street. Any other questions, or anybody want to make any comments? We're welcome. Any comments you want?
Walt, you might just want to tell them about the why, because that was a significant thing between Brunswick and Baltimore, where that Mount Airy was one of those unique places where they could do what they did.
Well, I'll take the time to, yes. Mount Airy had a unique importance. This was called a turnaround Y. Why?
You could come from Baltimore, pull into Y, back down into Mount Airy, take the other Y, go back to Baltimore. Same thing from Brunswick. You come from Brunswick, pull in, back down towards Baltimore, and go back to Brunswick. You didn't have to have a turn.
But why?
The reason was they needed a place to turn.
Steam engines.
You were dealing with steam locomotives. You needed a place to turn helper engines, which helped the trains east and westbound over
But
the grade.
why? Because they generally only went in forward direction. So they had to be turned around. They had a front and a rear. General practices were, for none other reason, that they always traveled in a forward direction. So you had to turn them around. Okay? But it was mostly used for the helper engines also. And it was only recently that this part of the track was abandoned. And they still speak of being at the Y in Mount Airy too. I've just come off the Mount Airy branch. Okay? I find it interesting that the realignment, reconstruction was called the Mount Airy Cutoff.
Cut off Mount Airy.
Hope the engineer's name wasn't Bobbitt.
It was 40 men used to go to work on there every day.
From Watersville? 40 men from Watersville. Okay, any other questions? I don't want to hold you any longer. I don't have anything else to say other than a couple hours worth of stuff. Yes, we're going to do some thanks here in a minute.
You were talking about the names in the summit by just the tunnel.
Yes.
When we were kids, we used to ride Van Branch Road down the Iron Bridge, right across.
Right.
And the trains got to be so long coming out of Brunswick getting into Baltimore that were loaded with coal and stuff. They used to put one or two helpers behind them. The cutoff was always at the Iron Bridge.
Well, that's the summit of the grade, so that confirms it. By the way, it was 828 feet at the top of the summit with the planes, 716 feet. So they cut 112 feet or so off of it when you put the new tunnel through and moved the grade east a good distance. I want to do this. I want to thank Judy Elwood for putting this whole program together, all four of them. She's done a good job. I want to thank the Four County Society of Model Engineers for providing the refreshments along with the auxiliary. Unfortunately, I was left over from last week. I would like to thank B. Beck. Mr. Beck has always been a good resource for this information, and like I said, it probably would have been him in this spot. I want to thank Mr. Slayton, who had these slides that I was so grateful for and gave me the opportunity to get in his car and go down and see if we actually knew what we were talking about. And after looking at this map and getting the surprise of our life, because it says down here is original location of plane number 1, which is about 3,000 feet east of where we said it was. So we concede that the map is wrong and we're right, but that's an interesting question anyway. But we've proved it. We know what we're talking about, and we're quite sure what we're saying is true. Couple more thanks first.
Hear the train whistle blowing now, it's always before it goes through the tunnel.
Okay, or crosses Pike's Crossing. They have to blow at Pike's Crossing.
They blow at Bottom Road, is what they blow at.
Yeah, Bottom Road or Pike's Crossing. But why would they blow for a tunnel?
Hobo's out of it.
What?
Usually all train people, they go into that other part where the track is.
I'll get back to you in a moment, Daddy. I was riding on the train between the RDC trip that we had between the Mount Airy Fall Festival and the Sykesville Fall Festival a number of years ago. And I was up front with the engineer that was there. And he would blow at the bridges. He blew at the tunnel. He did all the proper things. And I said, why do you blow for the tunnel? I knew, but I wanted to see if he knew. And he said, because the book says I'm supposed to. But he didn't know why. Why did they blow for the tunnels, Daddy?
Because kids would get out there with those four-wheel bikes.
That's today.
Walk right across the track, they get wound up on the track.
Not only today, but they also blew for the cattle and the deers and the wild animals and people that might be in there. And today they have to make sure they blow because of these fools on their ATVs and four-wheel drives. And I don't want to say it, but didn't our fire company get caught in there with a four-wheel drive vehicle one time in the tunnel?
Jim Linton had to go down and pull them out.
Had to go, they went hiking up through the tunnel on a four-wheel drive here at the fire department. I'm sure they're a little embarrassed about that, but it's all right.
There's that.
Don't go on the railroad with any powered vehicle, and I'd stay off of it with a bicycle too. Okay? Be very careful wherever you go. I saw a little kid almost get nailed on one of those three-wheeled things right down here at this Y. I was there when they came riding. No, this one down here, I'm sorry. I was riding or walking down there, and they came riding up beside the railroad track, a train right behind them. They had no idea. He got stuck trying to get across the track, the turnaround Y track, and his parents kept right on hiking on up the road. He was about 50 yards behind them. But fortunately, he was able to pick his thing up and move it out of the way. A couple more thanks. You people for coming out. Unfortunately, this is the last one.